Hello everybody, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today is an especially exciting day because today is October 1st. That's right, Friday, October 1st, the first day of the month of Halloween, the first day of the month of Metroid Dread, and in fact, we are now officially 1 week exactly from the release of Metroid Dread. It is honestly pretty wild, man, that we're only 1 week away from Metroid Dread. You know, Metroid 5, a game that only a couple of months ago was nothing more than a dream for most of us Metroid fans, and those of us who have been really following the series and just praying for new games and waiting for any kind of official update on Metroid Prime 4. And then, of course, we get the drop about Metroid 5, it's Metroid Dread, they're resurrecting the idea. Everything that we already know and everything that I've been blabbing to you guys about nonstop since Metroid Dread was revealed. And so, obviously this is a massive deal. I myself am taking a week of PTO from my job to be able to enjoy the game, just like I did with No More Heroes 3 last month. I'm very fortunate that I get to do that. And, yeah, this is a game I've been waiting for years. And so I thought it would be fun today to kind of just sort of talk about what we can expect from the game, what we know, and just everything that we see Nintendo doing to promote and market the game leading up to its release, and the fact that it really bodes well for the future of the Metroid franchise. Before we dive too deep into this Metroid Dread topic, I like to remind you guys I'm always trying to grow the channel here on Rule of Two Review. I upload every single week. I cover all things Nintendo, I discuss every single thing about Metroid possible, and I discuss all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So what more needs to be said about Metroid Dread that hasn't already been said? Or what more could I even possibly have to say about this game that you haven't heard me specifically say? Because I feel like in only the 3 or 4 months or whatever since the game was revealed, I've probably made about 30 or so videos on the topic because I'm just that excited, man, and honestly, I can tell that you guys are just as excited. I mean, the return of Metroid, and most importantly, as has been discussed by myself many, many times, it's the first time we're actually going to be moving forward in the timeline of Metroid in 19 years, as Sakamoto and Nintendo have discussed many times, and the importance of that cannot be understated. Obviously, the fan reaction and the fan discussion and even some of the fan infighting, you can say, that we've seen has been a little bit telling about what's going on with Metroid, and some people getting a little bit confused over what it means for Metroid Dread to be coming out and being the game that it is, you know, not to mention resurrecting the whole Dread concept. And then people having issues with spoilers, people trying to claim that the 19-year gap between Metroid Fusion and Metroid Dread means that certain other things that we've seen release maybe aren't canon or Nintendo isn't acknowledging them. Obviously focusing on Other M here, and I find it so maddening and frustrating, mostly because it's just, I just see huge gaps in logic. It's not about people having to like or dislike certain games or whatever. Like, everyone's opinions on an individual product is their own, and so that's fine, but like, logically, people have tried to connect dots that just simply don't make sense and that there's zero evidence of. I have loved seeing Nintendo's marketing and promotion of this game. I love the fact that we can all acknowledge with our logic that it has been 19 years since Metroid 4 and now Metroid 5, okay? There's been several games released between these two games, including a couple of Metroid Prime games. And I think that every single one of those games is clearly canon and part of the overall story. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens after Metroid Fusion, man. I mean, when that game wrapped up, and then we started to really understand and put together the timeline of the Metroid franchise, it became really cool when you see that, oh, Super Metroid happens, then Metroid Other M happens, then Metroid Fusion happens, and then we don't know what happens after that. We've been waiting almost 20 years to find out what that is, and that even includes when Metroid Other M released in 2010, 11 years ago, and took place between Super Metroid and Fusion, and it was still a story that didn't let us know what happened after Fusion. Now, we finally get to find out. The revival of the Dread concept, you guys, is so incredibly cool, man. It's like, part of it is clearly just what the vision has always been for the game that took place after Metroid Fusion, going back to the original rumors in the late 2000s, and the other part of it almost feels like a bit of fan service or a love letter to the fans, to say, hey, we know you, the diehard Metroid fans, and the folks who are really steeped in the lore and the sequence of events, really care about this fact that, this Dread thing was floating around in 2007 or whatever, and that it never happened. And so when we finally decided, and Nintendo finally decided to move forward with a Metroid 5, we knew we had to revive the Dread concept and deliver on the promise of what was being discussed back in like 07 and 08 and what have you. And so to see it actually come to fruition and get a glimpse into what they were thinking about 13, 14 years ago is so monumentally cool. I mean, to think they had this idea about these AI robots that were hunting Samus, it's really fascinating. And to know that at the time they felt the technology probably wasn't there to properly drive maybe the AI behind these robots, and now that technology does exist, so their full vision could be realized. And the fact that it also seems to play into what's happening with the X-Parasites and the extinction of the Metroids, Samus' relation to them, the SAX itself probably playing some kind of a role, and then wrapping up the Chozo, my favorite aspect of the Metroid lore, you guys know, into this whole story. Metroid Dread is literally them throwing the kitchen sink into one game, but not forcing it, and I don't think it's going to be stuff that feels maybe disingenuous. I think that this is going to be the best of all worlds. Best of 2D, best of 3D, best of Metroid Dread, best of the X-Parasite, best of the Metroids, best of the Chozo, right? Just Metroid best. They might as well just call this game Metroid best as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I've been waiting to see what Dread's all about, and we have so little to wait, it's crazy. Now, another important aspect to acknowledge is how Sakamoto and Nintendo have confirmed that Metroid Dread represents the end of the saga or story so far, so to speak. So they're essentially considering Metroid 5 to be the end of this part of Samus's journey, and what they've said several times, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but they've literally said, there are quotes out there, and I've discussed them on prior videos as well, that they've looked at it as like the end of Samus and her intertwined fates with the Metroids. So it's almost like the Samus and Metroid storyline, which has both pit Samus against Metroids and also had her working with some Metroids and forming bonds and relationship with Metroids, and then being infected with Metroid DNA and becoming part Metroid herself. This whole storyline of Samus with and against the Metroids is apparently supposed to conclude with Metroid Dread. But they've then also gone on to confirm that there are plans in the works for the next chapter of the Metroid series. Very interesting, very fascinating, very mysterious, but to me it also becomes exciting. I love the idea of them coming to a designed conclusion, saying this is where we've decided to end the story with Metroid Dread, but then being comfortable starting new stories going forward after that. How Metroid Prime 4 will fit into this is also a mystery, but to me it's also incredibly exciting and interesting to see how that's going to play out, because as I've discussed, Metroid Prime 4 could add a ton to all of what's going on here. It could take place way before Metroid Dread. It could take place after Metroid Dread. It could show that the story of the Prime trilogy reaches much farther in the timeline than we truly understand. And it could even be, when they talk about starting new chapters after Metroid Dread, there's a chance that Metroid Prime 4 could both conclude the Metroid Prime saga while also represent the beginning of a new chapter. I mean, anything's on the table. It's up to the writers. It's not up to us as fans to say what is possible or isn't possible. It drives me crazy when some fans try to do that, like we're all knowing and all seeing. We're not. The writers, those working with Nintendo and Mercury Steam and Retro Studios, who are putting pen to paper to say this is the story we're telling, they could take it in any direction that makes sense. And to me, that's just one of them. Metroid Prime 4, concluding the Metroid Prime saga while also starting a new chapter. That's one of many options that to me is completely on the table. And now I do want to wrap up and end this video with a reminder about how Nintendo is choosing to market this game and people's reactions to it. I've discussed on a couple of videos now this outrage we've seen over some fans feeling like Nintendo is spoiling the game by showing too much in their promos and their marketing, in the Dread reports, and in the trailers. It's an interesting conversation. I've tried to be, fairly open to the fact that everyone has a different threshold for these things and everyone is allowed to have that. But I also think that there have been some misunderstandings over how the Metroid games are meant to play out when you play it for the first time. And the fact that if Nintendo chooses to put something in official marketing, it's clearly not meant to be that much of a surprise within the gameplay itself. You have to allow for marketing, Dread reports and teasers and trailers to set up the mystery and the intrigue of what's going on. Here's the base level concept. Here's some enemy antagonist that's going to play a role in the story and is going to impact Samus's journey, but we don't know everything about that person. Seeing the occasional boss fight or the occasional upgrade or weapon or missile expansion, that's not, being surprised by those things isn't what Metroid's about. It's about enjoying the gameplay after you have them. They're not trying to surprise you with those things in Metroid games. They've never done that, and people are thinking that that's what they're suddenly doing now, and I personally don't see it that way. And so that conversation has been very interesting. I've had no issues with the Dread reports and the trailers, and I think it's worth noting when we see how regularly Nintendo has been updating Twitter and Dread reports and YouTube and Nintendo Directs with content and promos about Metroid. We're seeing the Metroid name and Samus's face everywhere right now. You're seeing billboards and retail stores setting up signs with Metroid all over the world, and people are tweeting about it like crazy. You guys, this is the best timeline to live in for Metroid. This is what this franchise needs. It's so beloved. It has a huge diehard fan base. This series is known for being the utmost quality, but it's never sold to the proper standards. This is how Nintendo makes it happen. And if we maybe need to deal with the fact that we're going to see a boss revealed in an official trailer from Nintendo, and we're going to read about the names of the areas you're going to explore in a Dread report, I feel like that's a worthy sacrifice to help make Metroid as successful as it deserves to be. I mean, imagine a different timeline where Nintendo barely spoke about Metroid. I mean, really close your eyes and think about that option, you guys, where maybe it was revealed during E3. We saw that first trailer. Maybe we saw a treehouse, okay, and so we got that whole thing during E3. And then since then, imagine if they've been almost completely silent. No Dread reports, or even only one or two Dread reports. No other teasers, no other trailers, no nothing. No tweets from Nintendo, okay? Let's pretend we lived in that timeline. Where do you think the hype would be for Metroid as a franchise and Samus as a character right now, 1 week before the game released? I think it would be strong only for the diehard Metroid fans. We wouldn't be seeing everyone in the gaming sphere talking about Metroid, and we wouldn't be seeing people to this degree saying, I'm finally going to buy and play my first Metroid game. Would you get a couple of smatterings of some folks like that? Yeah, sure, but would we see it to the monumental degree we see right now? I sure don't think so. I'd be surprised if most of you think so. So that's where we have to see Nintendo's marketing approach with this and just blasting the internet with Metroid Dread as a smart, good thing that's going to be helpful for the franchise and make it have a very long, healthy life for years and decades to come. Which is what we all want as Metroid fans, right? And game fans and Nintendo fans. Don't we all want this? I think we do. And to me, the way Nintendo has decided to go about it is the way. And I think that by the time all is said and done and we've all played Metroid Dread from beginning to end, mark my words, quote me right here in this video 1 week before the game comes out, we're all going to have learned that everything we saw in the trailers and everything we read in the Dread reports didn't spoil much of anything. We're all going to be just blown away by how good the game was, and we're going to say, wow, it turns out at the end there were things I didn't know were going to happen. I guess Nintendo knew how to not spoil the game in their official trailers and their official marketing. Shocker. And so here we are with 1 week to go, and these are my thoughts. So excited. I'm ready for my time off of work. I'm ready to dive into this game, and I know you guys are as well. This is exciting, man. 19 years waiting for Metroid 5, you know. It hasn't been 19 years since the last Metroid game. Prime 2, Prime 3, Federation Force, Hunters, Other M, all of these games. Samus Returns, Zero Mission, all of these games I just named, released after Metroid Fusion. All of them are still canon, and it's been great to get those Metroid games, but we've never had Metroid 5 until now. That is a big deal, my friends, and I'm very excited. So, what do you guys think about my conversation below? How excited are you for Metroid Dread? Discuss everything we discussed today, and let's be excited. 1 week to go, man. So that's what I have to say about that. With that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.